I
See you.
His mother throws him out of the house after he reveals to her that he's gay. Then, after spending years in a homeless shelter, he decides to enlist in the military and become a Marine. But for what reasons?
My name is Elegance, right? Any room I've ever walked into, everyone's assumed I'm gay before I've ever walked into that room. So that means that all the things that men do in those kind of private, intimate moments, I was naturally excluded from until I joined the Marine Corps.
I'm Eddie Robinson, and stay tuned as we speak candidly with Elegance Bratton, the writer and director of the autobiographical film, The Inspection. He'll share personal insight into his tumultuous relationship with his mother and why he's still grappling with notions of reconciliation, acceptance, and love years after her tragic death. Oh yeah, I feel you. We hear you. I see you. You're listening to I See You. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson. Seeing is believing. And that's what writer-director Elegance Bratton has had to use as his mantra ever since he realized his dream in filmmaking. Seeing oneself on screen, the images that are being portrayed in media. If you're not able to see yourself, then how do you know what's possible for you in life? And his directorial feature film debut, The Inspection, was actually inspired by Bratton's real-life experiences. The drama tells the story of a young black homeless man named Ellis French, played brilliantly by the Tony-nominated actor Jeremy Pope. He faces homophobia both at home from his estranged mother, Inez French, played by acclaimed actress Gabrielle Union.
Marines. No UA's gayer than two left shoes, and everybody can see it.
And at a Marines boot camp.
Are you now, or have you ever been a homosexual?
No, sir!
I will break you. I promise.
And it's there where he decides to pursue training during the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell era back in 2005 in the hopes of gaining support and finding acceptance once he becomes an officer. Easier said than done because, as some of you may have recalled, the controversial Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy instituted during the Clinton administration remained in effect from February of 1994 until September of 2011. This policy prohibited military personnel from discriminating against or harassing closeted gay or bisexual members or those seeking entrance into the military, while at the same time preventing openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual persons from military service.
Should someone be able to serve their country in uniform if they say they are homosexuals, but they do nothing which it violates the code of conduct or undermines unit cohesion or morale apart from that statement? That is what all the furor of the last few days has been about.
Craving some form of stability in his life, Ellis French enlists in the military. Usher in a skeptical mother who's a New Jersey corrections officer and a devoted Christian, combined with a bullying sergeant and a near-death training exercise, The Inspection transforms into a poignant film that stays with you long after the credits roll. I see you. As we welcome to the show, writer-director of the A24 film entitled The Inspection, Elegance Bratton. Thank you enormously for being a guest on I See You.
Thank you for having me. It's a real thrill.
Now, is there a story behind your beautiful name, Elegance Bratton? Tell us more about that.
Sure. So my mother claimed that when I was born, you know how the doctor smacks you on the back?
Yes, or the booty.
On the booty, what have you. I got smacked, and I didn't cry. I gasped, and I clutched my pearls, and I looked back at her. And my mother said it was the most elegant thing she'd ever seen. And that's why she named me Elegance. But that's not even my full name. My full name is, my government is Elegance Giovanni. And then that's my first name. And I'm named after the poet Nikki Giovanni as well. And Bianco is my middle name. And Bratton is my last name, but it's the name my mother fought for. My actual last name was born with was my mother's last name, Gaskins. but my mother felt a lot of shame over being, a single Black parent and a teen parent at that in the 80s. So she took my father to court to give me his last name. So,
jeez.
So when people always ask me if Elliot's my real name. I'm like, that's actually my real name. That last name, that's been that's been a process of becoming.
Well, it already sounds like your mother, even without the inspection, she's played a massive role in your life, for good or for bad. But shout out to you and the remarkable work that you've done on The Inspection. Director of the film, this being your feature debut, released by A24. Shout out to A24, big huge fan of their material.
Yeah.
Tell us what The Inspection means to you, why you needed to tell this story. And from what I gather, it's pretty autobiographical, correct?
Yes. The Inspection is about Ellis French, a homeless gay man who joins the Marine Corps to win back his mother's love, but ultimately learns how to respect himself by enduring the trials of boot camp. It's a personal story as well. When I was 16 years old, I was kicked out of my house for being gay. And I spent the next 10 years of my life homeless. And I, at one point, ended up in a shelter. And I called my mother up and asked her if I could come back home. And she was like, well, if you're still gay, you can't be in my house. Why don't you join the military? And it's not the first time she brought the idea up to me. But at this moment in my life, I felt so low. I felt I was at, rock bottom, essentially. But I still wasn't really vibing with it. And then I went back to the shelter. I went back to the sleeping quarters, took a look around me and noticed that most of the men there were Black. And many of them had been in the shelter system for much longer than I had been, 10, 20, 30 years, some of them. And I had to ask myself if that was my future, And the next morning, I'm approached by a Marine Corps recruiter. And the recruiter asked me if I had ever thought about being a Marine. And I said to him, if I could look halfway as good in that uniform as you do, then sign me up, And so The Inspection is that story. And I got to boot camp feeling at, the absolute bottom of society. It's not like I didn't try other things, but I was met with rejection and ostracism everywhere I turned. So that by the time my drill instructor got me, I really thought my life was worthless. I had no meaning, value, or purpose in this world. And my drill instructor told me that was a lie. You are important because you have the ability to protect the Marines to your left and to your right. And, the notion that I was important because I could protect others was really revolutionary to me because I had been victimized so much in my life up to that point that, the thought that someone as weak as I thought I was could be trusted with such a valuable thing was something for me to hold on to and to lift myself up out of the position I was in. And I held on to it and I ran with it, all the way to right now, to this conversation with you. So when you ask why I make The Inspection, I'm really trying to put forth a message to the world of the absolute necessity and inevitability of mutual collaboration and how we all rely on each other for survival. And that is enough for us to focus on and to be reminded of. And I hope that, this is a movie for anyone who's ever felt abandoned, disregarded, overlooked. I hope that by the end of the viewing experience, you feel that you're important and you feel that you deserve good things in life. This is really a story of triumph over adversity.
It's I See You. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're here with guest Elegance Bratton. He's the writer and director of the film entitled The Inspection, a movie about a young gay Black man who decides to enlist in the military. One of his motivations to join the Marines has to do with him gaining acceptance from his mother, a devout Christian who's a single mom that kicked her son out of the house when he was 16 years old after he told her that he was gay. Your mother, your estranged mother, played by the amazing Gabrielle Union, Inez, that's her name in the character in the film. The scene where she hands the character, Ellis French, the birth certificate.
Ma, I need my birth certificate. I'm gonna be a Marine.
Marines. Slow. piece of paper. This all I have left of the dream I held for you.
You know, when some people have children, they do so with a certain vision in mind, right? You know, they want their children to turn out better than themselves, or
Yes.
perhaps sometimes with the mindset that something is owed to them, the parent. Can you offer up some suggestions or advice as to how someone can navigate not living up to parental expectations?
Well, first of all, you're not alone. I think everybody is trying to get their parents' validation in some way. And, this movie is really a dedication to the unbreakable bonds between mothers and sons.
Yes.
And, my mother was the first person to ever love me completely. And she was also the first person to holistically reject me. And she was a complicated woman. And ultimately, what I would say is that, first of all, the character Ellis French, he's someone who doesn't give up on people. And I think it's possible to hold out hope for reconciliation, but also possible to take the space and time that you need to develop yourself. A story I've been telling a bit on this press tour has been about how the moment I decided to become a filmmaker in earnest, Kate said, this is what I'm going to do. So I was 29 years old and I was restationed. I was initially stationed in Hawaii as a combat artist, and I got a chance to be stationed in New York. So I was right down the street from my mother, basically. And my mother was a real ball buster. She's a kicker type of a person.
Sure.
And she said to me, "Oh, you're here now. You think you're a filmmaker, huh? Big filmmaker. Why don't you buy a camera and film your little sister's graduation from elementary school? Show me what you got." And I did. I got a camera, I got a computer, went to my sister's graduation and started filming, and very quickly realized that most of her, if not all of her classmates, didn't even know she had an older brother.
Wow. And
her teachers didn't even know that my mother had a son. And my mom, that's the clean version of it. The dirty version of it, my mom, I think she had some undiagnosed mental stuff going on. And sometimes she could forget who she told what. So most people thought that I had been in the Marine Corps since I was 17 years old.
Interesting. And
my mother was even upset that I didn't show up to the graduation in uniform because she had told some people that story, Anyway, to say that hurt my feelings is an understatement, right? It was devastating to me. And in that moment, I realized that it was a part of a cycle of abuse that I had, for some reason, believed that I could change who I was and that she would stop being abusive to me. And after undergoing such transformational change to where she was so proud to brag about the job that I had, but so unwilling to acknowledge the journey that it took me to get there, made me realize that there was nothing wrong with me, that everything was going on with her. And I said to her, I called her and I was like, listen, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this game of trying to I spent my whole life trying to change myself for you.
Yes.
And you have never once tried to change anything for me. And now I'm an artist. That's what I want to do with my life. And in that moment, I decided to become a film director. I said, no, I'm going to do this now. You're not going to erase me. You are not going to avoid me. People are going to know that we are connected forever, even if you choose to not acknowledge it. I followed that up with this call where I told her, like, listen, I can't do this anymore. You have to learn how to treat me like a full human being all the time. You do not have to like my boyfriends. You don't even really have to spend time with them. But what you're not going to do is make me feel like I'm some sort of deviant.
Yes.
While you are reinventing your life in this pathological way. And I just said, listen, I'm an artist now. I have to trust my instincts. I can't trust my instincts if I continually show up to be abused by you. I can't trust myself anymore if I do that. So I'm going to stop. And you could call me as soon as you are ready to do better than this. Call me. Until you are, don't call me. And that's my advice to people. You can leave the door open. I've never stopped loving my mother. everything that happened in my life that's been positive since I left the Marine Corps, I would call her and leave her a message.
Yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, I have to live my life. You only have so much time on this earth. And if you are constantly in a place of having to change for someone for them to love you, then they may not ever love you the way that you need. And that's okay. You can find it elsewhere. And at least if you stop it, we're at the root. When you go to find it, at least you have a healthier place to go to find it. I spent a lot of years chasing love in like the most damaging and risky ways.
Totally get it.
Scary places I would put myself in, looking for this love that I couldn't get from home. And it wasn't until I said enough of this that I was actually able to open up the space in my life to find it.
Coming up, we'll continue our conversation with Elegance Bratton, the mastermind behind the autobiographical film entitled The Inspection. We'll dive deeper and learn more about the tumultuous and extremely intense relationship he had with his homophobic mother. Plus, we'll get his thoughts and perspective on why it's been so difficult or why it still remains a challenge for African American families to accept the fact that a loved one or relative in the family is gay or queer. Why is it so hard for Black families to move past all of this and change their stance around homosexuality? A fascinating chat you do not want to miss. I'm Eddie Robinson. Stay tuned. ICU returns in just a moment. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying this program, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, ICU with Eddie Robinson. You can hear all the past episodes and be notified when new episodes are released. Also, please take a minute to give us a review or comment. We love getting feedback from our listeners. You're listening to ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson. Our guest is Elegance Bratton. He's the writer and director of the film The Inspection, starring Emmy-nominated actor Jeremy Pope, who plays Ellis French, a young Black man who's gay, who yearns for his mother's acceptance of his sexuality, actress Gabrielle Union, who plays French's mother, and actor Raul Castillo. He plays the role of a Marine Corps drill instructor who doesn't give up on French and encourages him throughout his training as he faces adversity while joining the military. I read somewhere that you never reconciled with your mother. Can you share with us what those last moments were like for you and what you believe to be her reaction right now with such a successful film? I know you'll receive accolades and awards all over the place, but share some details of what it was like for you prior to her death and then how you felt afterwards.
It's hard to really put into words exactly, because I think, first of all, this movie is about the kind of fallibility of memory. And ultimately, in making an autobiographical film, what I've learned is that this isn't about the, recollection of events as much as it is about capturing and transmitting the essence of emotional truth. So what that means to me is that I'm investigating the impact of what happened, more so than the what, when, why, where, the 5 W's of what happened, if you will.
Yes.
Before she passed, it's interesting because sometimes the universe has a way of aligning things. Since the age of 16, my mother has been a ghost to my life anyway. When I was in her house, she was a ghost to me. I always say that I realized after my mother was killed that
she was killed?
Yeah, I can't get into it too much because there's a trial going on and I don't want to favor it in any direction. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. Yes.
But yes, her life was taken. And I always say, when you're alive, you're spinning all these plates. And when you die, every plate comes crashing to the ground. And then if you're lucky, you'll have people in your life who love you, who will put those pieces back together to understand who you were. And I think the great tragedy of being a parent, a child relationship, you will never know each other completely, even though you are innately connected to one another. And I didn't really understand my mother until she was gone, you know? So some of this stuff I'm saying, I realized after the fact, like she was orphaned at a young age. She didn't have anybody in her life providing her the unconditional love that I was seeking from her.
Okay.
So she didn't know how to do that, you know? So when you ask how I felt before, it's so funny because when you grow up in an abusive situation, you often blame yourself for it. You keep thinking there's something you can do differently to make the person not do that. And I thought I was over that until I got a chance to go to her house after, you know, she was killed, and walking around her house, she had all of my clippings from the New York Times, and she was searching me on her computer, and you know, she had everything from my childhood, all the things that I family photos and things that I hadn't seen since I really left home. She had it all there, and it was precious. And my mother was a hoarder, you know, so
we saw that in the film.
Yeah, it was precious to her. You know, it wasn't in the hoard. It was set aside. It meant something to her that it maintained its quality. She had my Marine Corps photo on her keychain.
Wow.
And although intellectually I thought I was at a place before she passed where I had forgiven myself and stopped blaming myself.
Yes.
It wasn't until I saw that she was still missing me as much as I was missing her, and she couldn't figure out how to get to me, that I really accepted the fact that it was nothing I could do differently.
Oh, fascinating story.
Sorry, it's a long story.
No, this is fantastic. No, and this is stuff that we've never known about you, and so that's great. And was she an officer?
She was in the prisons. She worked in the prisons.
Okay.
That's the other thing. If you want to know what's going on, every prison in America, I've never been to one that hasn't had a woman that reminds me of my mother in it. Not one. Not one. Black women, single Black mothers. And the thing I want to say that I know to be true, everybody who's in jail is in jail. Everybody is institutionalized by the prison system.
Wow.
The prisons that come to your town and want to do business, trust and believe, they are a corrupting force to the families that are interacting with them. And that's not to say that prisons need to be I'm not making that argument. What I am saying is my mother came home carrying the prison industrial complex on her. And it informed her sense of shame, and it informed her sense of morality. And people need to, in this society, to take that way more seriously than they do.
Absolutely. It's ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're chatting with the writer and director of the film The Inspection, Elegance Bratton. What I love about The Inspection is your ability to misdirect the audience. You know, that misdirection concept. I'm thinking the film will go one way, but it goes in a direction I didn't quite expect.
Right.
And, you know, this certainly happened to me numerous times with my family in the past, where my mother would continuously ask me, even after I came out to her and my dad, my mother would always ask, when are you going to meet that special woman in your life? Even during the early stages of my surrogacy journey, you know, we've talked about this in a prior episode of ICU, but I interviewed her about me coming out to them. And she stated that they thought that I'd be going through a phase and that New York City made me this way. And if I were to move or get away from that environment, I'd go back straight. You know, why is it so difficult or a challenge for African-American families to accept, to forgive, to move past all of this and see someone for who they really are?
Gabrielle and Jeremy have been speaking about this so eloquently.
Yeah.
And I agree with them that ultimately this is the specter of white supremacy in our families. And, you know, there's historical answers to this as well. Like, for instance, at a certain point in the history of American slavery, it becomes illegal to transport slaves from Africa into the United States, which puts outsized pressure on the maintenance of breeding within the United States. And you'll see right around that time, the laws around homosexuality, banning sodomy, criminalizing loving relationships between people, but also demonizing loving relationships between same-sex people on plantations begins. So there is a distinct connection between whatever theoretical place people think white supremacy is in right now is built out of the real physical contribution of enslaved African Americans. And all of us was enslaved, including our sexual freedom. So I think the root of it comes from the exploitation that we've experienced as a people with this system. And then, for my mother, and I got to say thank you to Gabrielle Union for helping to bring my mother back to life, because she gave me a chance to have some closure that I would never have had if she wasn't in this film. But that being said, my mother was a 16-year-old unwed Black mother in the 1980s. The Reagan America made women, children like my mother, into social pariah and blamed them for all sorts of social issues, from the crack epidemic to the HIV crisis, all of that. And my mother, being a Christian woman who immigrated from North Carolina into New York City, was already carrying a ton of stigma being an unwed teen mother in her Black community, right? And she felt like she did not want to be seen as someone who was making something corrupt. And unfortunately, that societal political pressure on her manifested in me getting kicked out of my house when I was 16 years old. Right. So when you ask what is the origin of it, I think it is what it has always been, right? Yeah. We are constantly transforming ourselves. Everybody does it, but Black people have to do it. Black gay people, I think it's just a part of our DNA in this society to be shapeshifters. And this is why casting Jeremy is so important to me, because he's an out Black queer actor. We don't get to see Black queer heroes in movies ever.
We don't.
Ever. And when we look at the world that Black queer men are living in, 1 out of 2 of us will be HIV positive in our lifetime, the CDC projects. We're 8 times more likely to be homeless, 8 times more likely to commit suicide. I believe there's a real consequence to not seeing yourself on screen and not believing that you matter in the world, and I do believe that people pay to see movies to see themselves and to see aspirational versions of themselves. Yes. That's a part of what we pay for, whether you're streaming it or whether you're going to the theater. So, that's where it's all coming from for me. It's really about talking to the Black community about its issues with homophobia and asserting that the version of Christianity that we have been taught is one that is oppressive to our imaginations. And there is a way to be Christian and to love your children. And if you can't do that, look at Gabrielle in this movie and ask yourself, if you were to die suddenly, would you be happy with where you left the relationship with your child? If you think you agree with Inez French, watch this movie and think about the people who made it. And hopefully that will change some hearts and minds.
There's a scene in the film where you walk into the shower area as your superior is taking a shower, someone who sort of, guided you on your journey through boot camp. And I'm yelling, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. How did your experiences in the Marines affect how you approach relationships now? And while you think of that, I want to mention this to you. I played rugby for a predominantly gay league, Gotham Knights in New York City.
Very cool.
Playing the sport taught me a great deal about protecting your teammates. The minute there's a weak link in the chain, right, you've lost the match or you won't win any matches. And so I find this, a very difficult notion for the gay community to comprehend or to subscribe to as it relates to protecting those to the left and the right of you. Even with our own, there's so much criticism and internalized judgments happening with our own community that it becomes difficult to even connect with other like-minded men to find a relationship. So I'm wondering, am I wrong in that assessment? And the prior question of how did your experiences in the Marines affect how you approach relationships nowadays?
When I got to the Marine Corps, it's tough because I came in during Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff have agreed to remove the question regarding one's sexual orientation from future versions of the enlistment application.
And I was coming from being in a homeless shelter. So I was not trying to do anything that would get me kicked out of the Marines, at all. I didn't even really fool around with Marines. So that meant that I kind of developed this camel-like approach to sex and relationships where I'm fasting for months at a time. And then when I have a moment, I'm gorging myself on men.
Okay.
Like sexual bulimia almost,
Got it. Got it.
but then on the flip side, though, French, like myself, when I joined the Marine Corps, I came in thinking that love was transactional and that there had to be a reason for someone to do something for me, right? That I was not enough, right? And then I came out into a gay world where that belief about myself was affirmed in, the gay bars and the bathhouses and everywhere you go. The transactional, like if you're cute, you matter. If you're not cute, you don't. I'm only talking to you because you're cute. That's just the way it felt to me at that time. Then I joined the Marine Corps, and I had to quickly learn the difference between admiration and affection and attraction, right? That meant like my name is Elegance, right? Any room I've ever walked into, everyone's assumed I'm gay before I've ever walked into that room. And they're right. So that means that the boy sports and the showers and all the things that men do and learn how to pass male privilege along in those kind of private, intimate moments, I was naturally excluded from just off of the strength of my name in most situations, until I joined the Marine Corps. And all of a sudden now I'm allowed to be on the team. I can't be denied from this team. And in the process, I'm learning how men can get along and be very, very close and not screw each other. Just anathema to the gay community, especially at the time I was coming up, So how did that change my relationships? When I first got out of the Marine Corps, I was still in that kind of feast or famine mentality in New York City. And I just got to a point where I'd had enough sex with everybody. I've just done it all. Everything I've ever thought about doing, I've done it. I'm good, And I literally got to a point where I deleted all my dating apps and I made a except for one. And I made a commitment. Except for one. And I made a commitment to finding a real relationship and not spending my time just, looking at people's emojis, trying to figure out what we could do together. And literally the moment I said, I'm ready to find someone real, for whatever reason, the one app I didn't delete, Jacked, my now husband, I call them my husband because they're non-binary. My husband, Chester, hits me up and their profile, instead of it being a bunch of emojis, says, I love movies and I hate imbeciles. And we've been together ever since, for 8 years. Wow. So I think the Marine Corps helped me to understand how to have all the parts of a relationship with a man that are non-sexual, and then life kind of set me up to be ready to apply those lessons in my romantic relationship with my husband, Chester Algernon Gordon, and creative partner who produced this movie as well.
That's wonderful. Wow. Let me speak to another aspect that I love about the inspection. It forces all of us to come to grips with the true meaning of honor, the true meaning of integrity, especially one's own truth. And for instance, I recall the very last scene in the film A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise, right? Tom Cruise plays this Navy lawyer that defends two Marines who've been accused of murdering a colleague. Tom Cruise's character, the lawyer, tells his client, who learns he's now been, being discharged from the military, he tells him the line, you don't need to wear a patch on your arm to have honor.
You don't need to wear a patch on your arm to have honor.
10 hut! There's an officer on deck.
Ironically, it's the uniform, right, that speaks volumes to those who see a soldier as a hero. And here you have in the inspection, there's a line that actor Jeremy Pope, Ellis French, says through tears with his superior. He basically says, I'm a hero to somebody.
Right.
If I die in this uniform, I'm a hero.
So to me, therein lies an interesting sort of dynamic of the complexities of being gay. As a gay Marine in this film, the military is being pursued as a source of strength, a source of support, for a sense of belonging, to achieve that honor. Whereas in A Few Good Men, for someone else, who's in the military, the notion of obeying orders, serving your country, holding loyalty, following a code, wearing that uniform, that brings honor. But when you place this huge value on truth, it sets you free, being truthful, caring for those who you love. And so I just find that dynamic of here's a character in the inspection who desperately wants to hold on to the uniform for a sense of heroic honor versus a character in A Few Good Men who learns that you don't need the uniform to show that you have honor. And it speaks volumes to the notion of the extraordinary complexities, right, that a man deals with he, she, her, gender appropriate when gay is or queer is brought into the mix, right?
Right. Well, I think that's true. And I think it's also a conversation about the Black veteran overall, right? Regardless of sexuality, because every major war that the United States has fought, Black folks have played a significant part of that fighting. And when you think about the Civil War, right? And these very often people who were on plantations their whole lives leave the plant as soon as they get free, right? They run over to the Union side, hopefully, when they weren't forced to be used by the Confederate side as well, right? Both sides of the Army had Black folks. But why would you leave when you're free and go to risk your newly free life right away? Because the uniform can make you legible in a world that refuses to see you, right? And in A Few Good Men, one of my favorite films, Tom Cruise, one of the greatest movie stars.
Mine too.
You know, in that film, these are white men. And they don't necessarily need a uniform to be important and valued and seen in this country. That's not to say that there aren't plenty of white Marines and soldiers and airmen and Navy men who are poor in this country and come to the armed forces for that definition. But you are always guaranteed, to a certain extent as a white male in this country, a certain level of just access to everything that Black folks and people of color and queer folks just have not had. And we're figuring out how to have it equally. And honestly, the country seems to be convulsing at the notion of equal opportunity for everybody, and this is where the armed forces comes in, right? When we think about the military, quiet as it's kept, this is one of the most progressive institutions in the history of the United States. And perhaps it's a Faustian notion of progression, for sure. Yes. But nonetheless, this is a space where it's been integrated longer than any other institution in the United States. It's been gender pay equity longer than any other institution in the United States. Right now, queer people can serve at large, writ large, whether they're trans, non-binary, male, female. Not to say that things haven't been fought for, but it is to say, when you put that uniform on, you now represent the hopes and dreams of a democratic society. And that representation to our troops in uniform, this is important to them. These young people, this is an important thing that they're theoretically putting their lives in the line for. So they demand of their institution even more than we demand of the world that is setting them up to be fed into this institution that many people disagree with.
Coming up, we wrap up our chat with Elegance Bratton, the writer-director behind the film The Inspection. We'll find out what kind of projects we can expect to see from him in the future, and he'll offer up some advice for those who have that desire to step out and pursue their own dreams and passions in life, but sometimes find themselves in survival mode. Plus, the filmmaker will also share some words of encouragement for parents when it comes to dreams and visions they had for their own children don't quite pan out the way they expected them to. I'm Eddie Robinson. A powerful final segment of I See You happens in just a moment. If you're enjoying this program, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, I See You with Eddie Robinson. You can hear all the past episodes and be notified when new episodes are released. Also, please take a minute to give us a review or comment. We love getting feedback from our listeners. We're back, and you're listening to I See You. I'm your host, Eddie Robinson, and we've been chatting with Elegance Bratton. He's the openly gay writer-director behind the new film, The Inspection, a deeply personal drama that touches on themes of acceptance and self-esteem. It's his autobiographical film debut, starring multiple Tony Award-nominated actor Jeremy Pope and acclaimed actress Gabrielle Union, who plays the lead character's mother. We learn through the movie that her character, Inez French, is a single mom who kicks her teenage son out of the house after learning that he's gay. Ellis French then joins the military in hopes of gaining the support and acceptance he so desperately wants from his mother. Inspired by my late father, who passed away unexpectedly at a young age, I promised him, Elegance, that he would be a grandfather someday before he died, and I wanted to uphold his legacy. I lived in New York City for 20 years. My religious parents shut me out in 2007 after I came out to them over the phone. But after a year of silence, it was my father who's the one who stepped up and said, "We love you. We may not understand why, and we may not understand what this is all about, but you're our son." So when he died, I explored this fertility process because I was tired of waiting for a partner. I was tired of the apps. Fast forward after so much drama and this intense surrogacy process, I'm a father to this beautiful baby boy who's 14 months old, Xavier. But I'm finding it a real hardcore challenge of raising a son alone as a black man in the state of Texas. And I'm realizing and discovering so much about what it means to raise a black boy. We hear a lot about, black girl magic and the phenomenon happened there, but we don't hear much about black boy joy because I'm conflicted, Elegance, in the spiritual arena because I grew up in the church, rural Mississippi. How to hold on to those spiritual components when a majority of Christians hold a different consciousness surrounding homosexuality, right? Especially in the black community. So, I'm still invisible within that spiritual realm of acceptance, of value, especially to those in that religious space. At any rate, I think, we need to change that, Elegance, in addressing these modes of race and masculinity. And I really applaud you with the inspection in doing that because when and using I statements here, I didn't see that in rural Mississippi of what it means to be gay. I desperately wanted to see a real man and not see the RuPauls, not see the Sylvesters, not see the Billy Porters until I realized the importance of me embracing me and not comparing my goals, my desires, my identity to someone else. But as a young child, a young adult, a young man, it was extremely difficult for me to push for more masculine images to be more prevalent in the media. And it's, again, a complex journey, but I find it even more difficult and challenging now more than ever before. And with movies like The Inspection, you've done a remarkable job in placing all of that as a discussion point. And so I thank you. I thank you for this film.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Thank you for saying that. That feels really good to hear. Thank you.
You've started your career in the early 2010s. You've done several short films, even a TV series. The 2019 documentary, Peer Kids, phenomenal. But with this project, The Inspection, along with the projects you've done in the past, and the films and the endeavors you will create in the future, what are you trying to convey to audiences who see an Elegance Bratton project? Will this be your lane of exploring concepts relating to identity, relating to queerness, relating to fierceness? What will be the kinds of stories and narratives audiences can expect from you and the work that you'll be doing moving forward?
Wow. For me, I have a motto that, my job is to take the audience to a place that they could never go without me. And I also believe that whoever is holding the camera is telling their own story, regardless of the genre or the affectation, right? So I'm looking to use my life experience and my worldview and to apply it across all the forms of filmmaking. I have cinematic dyslexia. I don't see a difference between documentary and fiction film. I kind of see the two kind of divergent paths to ultimately the same result, which is a movie. So in that regard, I'll continue to make documentaries. I'll continue to make fiction films. Yes, I'm interested in exploring identity, but I'm also interested in exploring genre. I want to do horror movies. I want to do comic book movies. I want to do all the movies that I liked growing up. Essentially, like when I got into filmmaking, rather when I got into movies as a fan of movies, I was just not aware of the art house as a 5-year-old in the early 80s, So, movies by Steven Spielberg were really important to me. Disney films were really important to me growing up. Movies like Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo was important to me as a kid. I love that breakdancing.
I love Electric Boogaloo. Phenomenal. It was a great soundtrack.
This is what you've all been waiting to see. Electric Boogaloo.
Great soundtrack, one of the best ever, revolutionary soundtrack.
Yes.
And I think rest in peace to Shabba-Doo Ozone.
Rest in peace for sure. Yes.
But I'm interested in dance movies. I really just want to talk about the human condition, and I want to find ways that are unexpected and really find things that are funny. I love comedy. I love telling jokes. I love laughing with my friends, and I love laughing at things that are true. So if you want to know what to expect from me, you'll be laughing at things that are true. You'll be titillated. And I guess that maybe the best way to summarize this would be like, I have my personal ethos about my work is that I'm trying to engage hopefully all three at once, but in some capacity, combination, God, fear, and sex. I feel like any great work of art is ultimately about God, fear, and sex in some sort of way. So I'm trying to hit those marks in my work in ways that keep me excited. Like I want to do TV. I want to do it all. I want to do commercials. You know, I want to have a Super Bowl commercial one day. You know, I want to do sports, all of it.
Love it.
More, please.
It's ICU. I'm Eddie Robinson, and we're chatting with the writer and director of the film The Inspection, Elegance Bratton. Elegance, you were a homeless youth, but you now find yourself releasing some incredible projects, including The Inspection. As you reflect upon your entire life and career up to this point of where you are right now in your life, what lessons have you learned about yourself thus far?
Oh, wow. Okay. I've learned that my weaknesses, the things I thought made me weak and I'm supposed to be ashamed of, are actually my superpowers. And that I'm valuable. I'm good enough. I deserve to be here. I learned that prayer works.
Wow.
It actually works. I've been saying a lot recently. 20 years ago, I was in a homeless shelter. And I prayed to God to get out of this survival loop. And I had no idea that as soon as I said that prayer, God had already said yes, that I was already doing what I was supposed to be doing to get to where I am right now. I had no idea. So I've learned to now have faith in God more, faith in myself more. And I guess ultimately I've learned that I'm good at being in love. I can actually have a family. You know, I want kids one day, soon, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that, you know, I'm worthy of the love that I seek. And that has been a really great thing to learn.
That's beautiful. Share with us reflections of inspiration, if you will. Mm-hmm. Speak to someone who might still be in survival mode. They may be homeless. They may be struggling to make ends meet. They may be in a job, an unfulfilling job that has them working paycheck to paycheck, but they do have a vision. They do have this desire to want to thrive, to be prosperous, but it's not happening. It's not happening fast enough or to a point where they'd like it to unfold. What do you tell someone who's still in survival mode?
What I would say to that person is that, one, I think you're worthy of all good things, even though it may seem like your life has gone off the rails, that your life is a catastrophe, and that it's all your fault. Just don't forget that you're worthy of good things. You know, you don't deserve to be treated or the way that you're being treated while you navigate invisibility. Secondly, I think it's important to use what you got to get what you don't got. Mm-hmm. And to really, it's tough. Like we don't live in a world that is seemingly interested in whether or not each and every person survives. Mm-hmm. So thus, when you're in a moment where the world seems to be trying to erase you, you know, delete you from existence, I think it's really important to kind of stand 10 toes down in yourself, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine what the alternative to what you're living would look like. And then imagine just one step in that right direction, you know? And I do believe that intentionality can really, really help to turn things around. And don't be afraid to ask for help, you know? Don't be afraid to ask for the help that you need when you need it, because you will be surprised by who's actually on your side, you know? But I don't know. This is more so to the parents out there who make people who get in these situations, but hopefully it's useful. But you got parents got to be careful what they say to their kids every day, especially when they're frustrated. My mother used to tell me that she wished she left me in a shoebox. This is the 80s, right? So you'd see all these teen moms on the news who like leave their kids at the prom. They have a baby at the prom and they throw it in the trash can and leave their kid in a shoebox on a fireman's porch, whatever. My mother would say that to me. I should have left you there. I should have, tell you things that, you're not, you don't have anything to look, if you're gay, there's nothing to look forward to. My mother used to tell me all the time, like if I ever got HIV, right, that she wouldn't allow me to use her silverware in the house. And I was like 6 when she's telling me this, 8 years old, she's telling me this stuff, So be careful what you say to your kids, because the negative things you say to your kids, they're going to be repeating it to themselves their whole lives. And you may come to a point where you're like, well, man, why doesn't this child ever live up to their potential? And it's because you've implanted the thought in their head that they can't. So just be careful what you say to your kids.
It's been a remarkable conversation. Elegance Bratton, thank you again for all that you've done and what you will be doing in the near future. We'll be looking for that Oscar-winning walk on the stage.
Oh, man. From your mouth to God's ears. One of these days it'll happen. So I'm not going to give up no matter what. But I appreciate your positive intentions. Thank you.
It's a remarkable film, The Inspection. Thank you so much, Elegance Bratton, for being a guest on ICU.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day, everybody.
Our team includes technical director Todd Holzlander, producer Laurel Walker, editors Mark DeClaudio and John Mitchell Good. ICU is a production of Houston Public Media. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen and download your favorite shows. I'm your host and executive producer, Eddie Robinson. And I feel you. We hear you. I see you. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.